If an employer ever says, we're like family here, what they mean is they're going to ruin you psychologically. And that was tweeted by Kevin Farzad. Hello and welcome to this week's episode of the Toy Talks podcast. You know me already, but for those of you who are new to the platform and the podcast, my name is Toy Washington, and bi-weekly I try my very best to release a new episode. However, for the first 2.5 years of this podcast and platform, I was uploading every week. However, my life has changed significantly, and it has meant that number one, I have to prioritize my mental health. Number two, I have to also recognize and accept that as much as I want to help everybody, there comes a point where I have to step back, and people have to then make the decision to take charge of their careers by also going back to podcast episodes and re-listening to them, because a lot of work-related topics, issues, events and experiences that I have also had, I have shared in the previous podcast episodes, and also my blueprint to success. I've also had a baby, which means that I've had to reprioritize my priorities, and my child comes first. So although I aspire to release a new episode bi-weekly, sometimes it just doesn't happen. It doesn't mean it's the end of the show, end of the road for the episode. It just means I didn't have time that week. I will try again next week. And that for me is fundamentally how I'm moving in terms of my platform and just my life, really, where I'm just going to show up and do my very best when I can. And if I can't, it doesn't mean anything negative other than I was just unable to show up at that particular point for whatever reason. And as long as I'm comfortable within myself about what that reason is, it's all good in the hood. So this episode is really special to me. Listen, every episode is really special, but this one in particular because I feel as though when people access the platform, they automatically assume it's for people in the corporate world. And I always say this all the time, and this is no different. This podcast is not just for people in the corporate world. I am no longer in the corporate world. I was in the corporate world for a couple of years and I could not take it. This podcast platform is for every single person, irrespective of your industry or your field. It's for just black women working. And I choose black women first because, of course, I'm a black woman. And also, as well, we are often underrepresented in organisations. Our experience in the workplace is completely different and unique. And then it's for every other woman who chooses to benefit from what I share here. That's how I want to open this episode. More than anything else, I would expect everybody to be looking at their employment contracts, especially as we are in a cost of living crisis and nobody's using the big R word, which is recession. And I definitely feel as though we are entering a recession, and they've just repackaged the wording. But effectively, that cost of living crisis is people cannot afford to live. And recently, I was told, it was reported in the BBC website, that people are starting to withdraw large amounts from their savings account. It was reported by the Bank of England, and I've actually checked it, and it was reported on the BBC website that a lot of people are taking out their savings, and it's not because they want to keep money in their houses, it's because they need to now rely on their savings because their salaries are not enough. I've always encouraged everybody to negotiate their contract and negotiate their salary, and that's why I created the negotiation masterclass, because it's not just about your salary, you know. It's also about the terms and conditions that you work under, and it gives you an opportunity to also see how flexible a company you are working for or intending to work for is. And the ability to negotiate your contract also gives you an opportunity to have a contract that reflects the current state of living. I think the other crisis that we're all experiencing are those people who do not negotiate. The people who are so grateful to have a job offer, but not realising that they're just putting a band-aid over something that will hurt them later on. If you don't negotiate your contract out of fear of somebody rescinding an offer, you are setting yourself up for failure. Don't be me many years ago where I accepted a contract at a really low salary and I couldn't live on it anymore. I couldn't even afford to eat every day at work and pay for transport. So I had to quit the job and go on benefits. It's then I realised that, number one, I need to be applying for the right roles first of all. And the right roles are, I already know my field and everything else, but and this is what I was saying to myself at the time. I need to apply for roles at a certain salary starting, and then trust myself to then try to negotiate. Your starting position cannot be from a position of scarcity or fear. Your starting position has to always be from a position of, damn, I did good, I got this role. Now, the second stage needs to be, it is subject to contract. And what that means is it's subject to negotiation. And that negotiation is anything that was agreed also as part of your offer through the interview process needs to be in the contract. An offer on its own is just an offer. In contracts, we call it an invitation to treat. But a lot of you believe what you're sold at interview, and it does not manifest in a contract that's mutually signed by both parties. If you do not know how to negotiate, or you're not sure where to start from, your starting position, you're not sure if you even have a walkaway point, go and have a watch of the negotiation masterclass on the toytalks.com website. It has helped many, many, many women. I've got very many testimonials from women all over the world who have accessed the platform, specifically that masterclass, and they have literally opened the door of opportunity for themselves. And also, there have been some people that have been like, you know what, Toya, I negotiated. However, I realised through the negotiation that this is not the employer for me. Because of the things that they were willing to do during that negotiation process, it made me realise that actually sanity and peace of mind is more important. And actually, I will use all the skills to negotiate with another company who actually respect work-life balance, who actually respect mental health days. And that leads me to something else. One of my friends is negotiating an employment contract, and she's decided that she wanted to explore the perm, yeah? And it's following on a conversation that I had with her. And she says, Toya, these are the things I want to know, can I negotiate these things? I said, you can negotiate absolutely anything. We've successfully negotiated into her employment contract mental health days. So she'll have a certain pot of mental health days every year, and she can draw down on those mental health days depending on what the issue is or why. She doesn't have to justify it. It's just a mental health day. She has also negotiated starting a little bit later because of other commitments that she has. She's negotiated her salary. And we're talking about negotiating a salary in a market where basically it's tight now. Hiring managers are understanding that it's an employer's market, and because of the ratio of how many people to how many jobs, it means that employers are driving down the salaries because they know that people either are changing jobs or panicking but are willing to accept bare minimum, and they're depending on employees or prospective employees to just not negotiate and just be accepting crumbs. So the market is very difficult at the moment. But what I love about my friend is that she has a do not give a shit or do not give a crap attitude. That she says, Toya, if they don't want to negotiate with me on these non-negotiables, I'm willing to walk away. And when she said that, I said, you bought the masterclass? And she said, yeah. Because on the masterclass, I talk about walk away points. Like, I have a walk away. Like, there's certain things that are non-negotiable for me. And I won't negotiate on those things because they're important for my mental health, for my development, and my career stability that I can give myself. And if these are not met, I'm willing to walk away because I know that if I am best in class at what I do, tick. I'm a subject matter expert, tick. You've offered me a job because you see what I can add to your organisation and the company and the role that's been offered. So I can add value. So if I know all those three things, then I can get another offer somewhere else. And this is why I always say you have to keep interviewing, because as soon as you take your foot off the gas and something changes within the industry, or, you know, I mean, take the current economic climate, as soon as you take your foot off the gas, you become strong-armed into just either accepting crumbs or just staying where you are and still receiving crumbs. The power of being able to interview, and I'm not saying interview every week, I mean periodically. I'm sitting here now telling you all that I'm on maternity leave. I gave birth 8.5 weeks ago, and I'm interviewing. I just do it now just to make sure that my brain is still ticking. I want to know what's going on in the market, and also I want to improve my interview technique, because I know that my success rate from interview to offer is about 95 to 97%. But in order for it to stay that way, I have to keep practicing. You know that old saying, practice makes perfect? It's the same like negotiation. If you keep negotiating and you push yourself to negotiate, you'll now negotiate, it'll become second nature to you. Like, you overcome that fear of, oh my God, they're going to rescind. You overcome the fear of, oh my God, that, you know, they haven't responded quick enough. Are they going to negotiate? I'm panicking. You overcome those things, because self-belief and the ability to project self-belief comes from the things you're willing to employ in your career as part and parcel of your career identity. Part of my career identity is perfecting my interview skill and maintaining that percentage from interview to offer. Now, the reason I say interview to offer, because I don't always accept. I'm a fussy babe. And you should all be too. Because when you know the standard of what you're willing to accept, crumbs is offensive. And as well as that, in a cost of living crisis where we're all tightening our belts, that we have to react. Otherwise, if we do not react by seeing what's on the market, by negotiating, by knowing that you need more money and then putting things in place, if you don't put those things in place, you're going to struggle. Because organisations are not going to people now and saying, woof, there's a cost of living crisis, we know the Bank of England have increased interest rates, right, we're all going to give you a salary increase. In an ideal world, that's what organisations will do, but they won't. They'll do like pay freezes, anything that strong arms you to stay and not approach them about considering making your terms and conditions better. And this is why I say you are a business of one. Whether you are a contractor, whether you're a perm, fixed term contract, a 0-hour contract, part-time, full-time, whatever the circumstances, this podcast is for you. This conversation is about you. And you have to get to a point of understanding the workplace is not only just a jungle, but it's chess, mate. It's chess. It's chess, and you have to move certain pieces. And unless you're willing to play the game, or unless you're willing to participate, unfortunately, you're just going to get left behind. A really interesting topic for me was Credit Suisse, and I am thinking that this podcast episode is going to be called that. I think the ancestors want me to call it that, so I will be calling this episode hopefully Credit Suisse. And I found it really, really interesting because amongst everything that happened with Credit Suisse, my first thought was, what about the employees? And I really did my research. I had conversations with certain people to really understand how a collapse of a massive international bank actually affects the people that work there. So just a little bit of a background. Credit Suisse is one of Switzerland's leading financial institutions. It's actually the second largest bank in Switzerland. So because it's the second largest bank in Switzerland, you can also gather from that it employs as a bank a lot of people, especially in Switzerland. Now, Credit Suisse had numerous scandals, which included spying and the collapse of two major investment funds. And Credit Suisse was heavily, involved in those two investment funds. And the collapse of those investment funds and all these scandals that you could easily Google, allegedly, actually led to the collapse of the second largest bank in Switzerland. As it currently stands now, UBS has bought Credit Suisse, and actually that should have already been concluded in June 2023, just gone. And then apparently UBS are planning to then sell parts of the Credit Suisse business off. Now, I don't know if they're going to rebrand Credit Suisse UBS or keep the name. Now, that will be quite interesting to see what they do, because, and the reason I raise that is because Credit Suisse now is kind of like tainted if you think about it. Is it easier to sell off parts of Credit Suisse by renaming it UBS? Because for me personally, I wouldn't be wanting to buy anything to do with Credit Suisse if it's labelled Credit Suisse, because it's collapsed. So why would you want that association? So it'll be really interesting to see what UBS do as part of, you know, having now bought Credit Suisse and now intending to sell parts of it off. Now, when looking at the impact of the collapse of Credit Suisse, it employed, as a bank or financial institution, 50,000 staff were employed by Credit Suisse. And then it was divided into 5 divisions: wealth management, Swiss bank, asset management, investment bank, and capital release unit. They had 150 offices internationally, and it is estimated that 12,000 jobs are going to be lost, and primarily in law, accounting, and consulting. Now, remember I said that Credit Suisse is a major employer in Switzerland, but what about the people that employed internationally? Credit Suisse has a massive presence. It's, you know, when you mention it, the name Credit Suisse, it's like, you know, the Hermes of banks, if you like. Everyone knows Credit Suisse. Now, bearing in mind that a lot of these employees are highly skilled and they're highly experienced employees, and they are now going to flood the market. Yeah, they're going to flood the market because, for me personally, I wouldn't wait to know if my job is in jeopardy. I'm just going to jump. And this is what happens when redundancies take place. You see, there is a responsibility as an employee that you have, and I'm talking to the perms now, because contractors, we operate from a different side of our brain. Yeah, and by virtue of the fact that we're a contractor, businesses being sold, you know, and businesses collapsing doesn't really affect us directly as employees. It affects us if, you know, you're contracting and obviously they want to get rid of headcount, they're going to get rid of the contractors first. But as a contractor, there is an assumed risk that we take when we are contracting, right? So for contractors, it goes without saying that you should know what's going on in the market. With employees, I feel like employees get a little bit more complacent, because people still have this mentality that if you're perm, there is some type of security. And I continue to tell you there's no such thing as job security. And COVID highlighted that. Some people have forgotten the lessons they learned, witnessed during COVID. And I will forever bang on about it, because it gave us an opportunity to sit with ourselves. It became an employees market. The shift of power went to the employees. And we actually saw businesses for what they were. We started to understand our value as employees. And also as well, we also got to see how organizations adapted to drastic, crucial change. And it just happened to be a worldwide event that happened that forced everyone to now pay attention to organizations who, number one, you know, didn't support staff. Number two, couldn't acclimatise to things as basic as working remotely. But there are some financial institutions and some organisations and some roles, like investment banking, that really struggled with being remote. So if remote was important to you, it was very difficult to make that transition in investment banking. In finance, some financial institutions struggled with it. I digress. So a lot of these employees now who have either left, been made redundant, or their jobs are in jeopardy, are highly skilled and experienced employees, and they are going to really find it hard to find another role in the current economic climate. Because number one, it is to be expected that because they're flooding the market now, they're going to drive down salaries, because the barrier to entry will be higher. employment agencies are going to be crazy, and other financial institutions are going to try to move mad. But it shouldn't be underestimated that these people who are, let's call them ex-Credit Suisse employees, are highly skilled, highly trained, and are assets. The problem is they'll be flooding the market at the same time. So maybe it's 1 or 2 interviews for a particular role now becomes 4, 5, 6. Do you understand what I mean? And that's what I'm trying to say about it being really difficult in the current economic climate, especially because people, organisations are trying to curb their spending. Now, it doesn't mean they won't spend it, because at the end of the day, you know, if you have a requirement and you need someone to fill that requirement, you're going to have to pay a certain salary. But it's about what the market now dictates that salary to be, and what skill set you have over and above your peers that makes you stand out as a subject matter expert. Now, can you understand why I always talk about being a subject matter expert? And it requires you to invest in your own development. As I'm sitting here with you now, I am investing in my own development over and above having a master's in law, having a law degree, going to law school, doing my level 4 SIPs. I have to keep on investing in myself, and also making sure that I work for organisations where I can develop myself and where I can continue to develop. Because where I'm at in my career now is the organisations I work for and the industries they're in is even more important now to my development. So when you start now looking at your career in that way, you start operating differently, because to be a subject matter expert, it means that you can't be average. You have to be better than, so that when you're having conversations, or when you're invited to have a conversation, they know that they're dealing with above average. Do you understand? The collapse of Credit Suisse also highlights, you know, the lack of stability and the fragility of the global financial system. But also, it does highlight the fragility of organisations in the current climate. It also highlights, I mean, Credit Suisse did not collapse during COVID. They didn't. They collapsed now that we are all in a worldwide cost of living crisis. Go figure. I think the learning lessons here is to, as employees, even as contractors, is, you know, recognising the signs of when a company is in trouble. Now, if you are a perm employee, 0-hour contract, part-time employee, but you effectively are a permanent employee, you need to be looking at, especially if it's a limited company, or even a limited public, whatever, you need to be looking at the board of directors. You need to be looking at, is there a lot of movement? If the company's on the stock market, are the shareholders selling their shares? You know, and if this is happening by more than one, I'm going to start paying attention. When public companies now are reporting their financials, you don't need to be a mathematician to know if they're reporting profit or losses. You don't. This is a Google thing. They have to publish these things, especially when they're a public company. There's certain rules and regulations that require them to disclose certain information. I always think it's important to do future career planning, and it can happen every year. Some of you are doing New Year's resolutions. You guys need to be doing future career planning resolutions. That's what you need to be doing. Rather than writing vitriol and hate under people's posts and commenting negatively on social media, some of you need to be focusing on the development of your career and understanding that the lack of development in your career is the poor choices you've made, or the lack of choices you've made. And that's the truth. Because there's no point in me sharing my blueprint and coming on here and sharing certain things, but you don't want to use it. But instead, you'll send me emails asking me, Toya, you did a podcast episode on grievances. Can you tell me what episode that is? I'm not going to respond to that. And no one that works for the Toya Talks team is going to reach out to me and tell me that that email is there in the mailbox for me to respond. Do the work yourself. Do the work. It's a really difficult time. Even me, I can sit here and tell you, I'm a subject matter expert. I've spent a lot of time developing my career and money. And I'm telling you that the market is bad. But I don't really have much fear in terms of my career. Because I've done the work, you see. I don't do the work when there's a crisis. I do the work when things are seemingly going well. Because things can change. And I'm doing interviews. These people don't know I've given birth 8 weeks ago. It's none of their business. I'm getting those interviews. I can sit here and say to you, depending on the sector, will depend on kind of what's happening in your field. I can tell you in my field, as a contractor, the phone is quiet. It's really quiet. And part of it could be it's the summer holidays. But I went on maternity leave on the 1st of April and it was quiet from the 2nd to the last week of April up until now that I'm talking to you, which is July. Today's, what is it, July 2nd? July 3rd. It's quiet. And I'm so grateful for my contacts. And some of my contacts I'm tapping into, having conversations with. Again, I'm not ready to go back in, to work. But I'm having those conversations to know what I'm going back into. And to now start thinking about, would I ever do perm? Would I? I was asked that question, would I? And that is a lot to ask for somebody who's been a career contractor for as many years as I have. But I can never say never, because if the market is bad, I have to respond. And if I was to go perm, understand very well now, the tick box, the contractual negotiation and the salary will have to be so watertight and top tier that to go perm, they not only understand that they have me as a prize, but the conditions of going perm have to be very, very watertight contractually. And I would only ever go perm, like, if I had to, let's just say I had no choice, had to go perm now, I'd only go perm for a year to 18 months. And that is me responding to the market. And also bearing in mind, I'm now a mum. So there is a priority from my perspective to settle my child into childcare and being able to respond quite quickly to certain things without being, the pros and cons of contracting is also, you're on a delivery model, you're getting paid a day rate, a really, really high day rate. They're not understanding that I've maybe got to go to nursery to collect my child because they've got a cold. Whereas when you're in a perm role, that perm role, they have a duty of care to towards you. And part of that, if you negotiate it properly in your contract, is to allow you and to support you to have a work-life balance. There are pros and cons of being perm and being a contractor. And I'm telling you right now, I will continue to be a career contractor, but I will never remove or let go of the contracting mentality if I had no choice but to go to perm. And one of my friends I love so much, when it comes to how she sees her career, she pivots. She continues to pivot from contractor to perm, and she responds to the market, and she does it very, very well. And she sets a very good example to me about what the options or prospective options are for me if the market continues the way it's going. I continue to digress. Now, with Credit Suisse, and you guys have to follow me, sometimes I'll be jumping, but I know you guys be following me. And if you're not, then I apologize. And also as well, I have a learning disability, I'm dyslexic, so it does affect how I process things, and I do jump and stuff, but for the most part, the message is very loud and clear, injected. So I was talking about kind of learning lessons and signs of companies in trouble, how employers can protect themselves. And I feel like the best way to protect yourself is to be aware of what is happening with your organisation. It's the only way. If you're going to be made redundant, you're going to be made redundant. And again, I have a redundancy masterclass to ensure that an organisation is following the correct process in terms of redundancy. I have templates within the redundancy masterclass that helps you to manage your redundancy. And I say manage because some of these organisations panic, react, and make people redundant without following due process. Or some organisations are not even developed enough to be able to pause and make sure they're doing the right thing. So you get to hold them accountable to making sure that they're managing your redundancy properly. And also, as well, entitlement, there are legal protections you have when you're going through a redundancy process. And this is why I did the redundancy masterclass. And this is why I keep saying to you, you may not need it now, but these things are available to you. Look at the current market now. I mean, the collapse of Credit Suisse. If somebody is going through a redundancy process, would you not go onto the toytalks.com website and go and have a listen, watch, download the redundancy masterclass? Because for me personally, I would. A lot of employees as well, as part of their quote-unquote benefits package when they were offered a role, were given shares of the company. Now, I'm going to say a couple of things. Being given shares of a company is great, okay? It means that you now also have a further or additional vested interest in an organisation. But for many, if not most, Credit Suisse employees, those shares are meaningless now. Absolutely meaningless. And depending on the value of those shares, they've lost out financially quite significantly. And they're actually effectively worthless. This is why I say, you know, when you are offered a role and they tell you all these company benefits, right? So they might say a role, they offer you a role and they say, oh, it's, I don't know, £70,000 plus benefits. The whole package, including your salary, is 100,000. Don't get distracted by the 100,000. I have a private pension. And yes, if you're a perm, having a company pension is great. But that's not a benefit. That's a legal requirement that they offer you some type of pension advice and some type of pension. That's a legal requirement. So when they call it a benefit, you think you're getting something additional over and beyond your salary or your contract. It's almost like it's a smoke screen for you to just blindly accept an offer without really looking at it holistically, or knowing that you can negotiate for more. So I'm really careful about the word benefit in an employment setting, because the word benefit means you're getting something extra. But I'm telling you, if it's eye test, I can pay for my own eye test, but it's a nice to have. If it's a pension, I've got my own private pension anyway. Because if you were to leave that organisation, fine, you can take your pension with you, but that organisation is no longer adding to your pension. So it's in your interest to have some type of pension anyway. Number 3, bonuses. Bonuses, they might say, oh, you get a 15-20% bonus. But you've got to be careful, because in your contract, is it clear about the bonus structure? And bearing in mind, bonuses depend on the profits of an organisation. And if I know anything about some of the organisations I've worked with, bonuses sometimes are really hard to achieve if, for example, they have a criteria to achieving bonuses. And that criteria means that they are able to do you out of a bonus and give the bonus to others. So, for example, your objectives. You know, are you managing your objectives properly to ensure that you're able to then put forward a case for a bonus if you're not actually being offered one? If you listen to the Passing Your Probation Masterclass, I talk about objectives really carefully. And I talk about managing it throughout your whole employment. And much of it starts from your probation. Getting to a point of passing that probation and then building on your objectives throughout your job, so that your organisation, number 1, knows that you're evidencing your progress, and number 2, they can't wriggle out of giving you what you deserve. So that 15, 20, 30, 40, 50% bonus they put in your offer is also subject to whatever criteria they have. Now, you can negotiate in your contract what that bonus structure should be. And or to help you add that to your contract, you could ask them, what is the guidance on this? Can you send it to me? Because it's all well and good putting it in someone's offer, but unless that person knows how to get to the bonus, it doesn't mean nothing. But you package it and repackage it and add it to an offer, and then it seems that the person's getting an inflated salary, when in fact they're being offered 70. They're getting 70, not the 100k. Do you understand now what I mean when I talk about company benefits and actually what it means? those company benefits for those now ex-Credit Suisse employees, it doesn't mean anything now. What can they do? They take their pension, because they could probably take that. And what else? Can't take the company, can't take the shares, because the shares don't mean anything. Any bonuses? Well, if it's not tied to contract, in the contract, probably don't even get a bonus. So they probably just get in their basic plus whatever redundancy allows them to get. So when you talk about company benefits, do you understand that it's only a benefit if it is watertight in your contract? And you've got to remember, some organisations do go through difficulties, and some go through these difficulties and don't even discuss it with their employees. So when you're having those all hands calls, or what do they call them, all hands company meetings, or whatever they're calling them, some of them are not being fully transparent about some of the difficulties. That is your job to understand what's happening in the organisation that you've decided to be in, whether you like the job or not, especially if something happens to the company and it will directly affect you. I was working for an organisation many years ago, and I was there for a couple of years, and I really enjoyed the role because of what I learned, and the company was quite good. And I say that, and I'm stuttering slightly because, you know, sometimes organisations can start off so well, and then you get a change in management and everything changes, and that's exactly what happened with me, and one of the main reasons why I ended up leaving. And also because they had a very flat structure. Anyway, so that particular company I was working for were then bought by a private equity company, and as part and parcel of that sale, it also meant that jobs were being made redundant. So we all went through a consultation. I wasn't made redundant, but that was partly because, number one, I was in an industry that was in demand. Number two, they needed that particular role, and they needed me. I was the longest serving person in the team. I had the most experience, and I was working on multi-million pound deals. So whilst being bought, they couldn't have me leave. Can you see, we use me, I use you. I think the biggest lesson I learned from that organisation when they were being bought is that, number one, it served them to work on a flat structure, i.e. everyone's on the same level, even though we all knew who was senior, because it meant that it would be more difficult for us to then ask for more money if it wasn't in our contracts. Number two, when they were going through this acquisition, there were no promotions, there were salary freezes, bonus freezes. So all those company benefits that were offered in the interview didn't mean anything now that this particular organisation I was working for is being bought by a private equity firm. So then what happened is, when I realised that a lot of the shareholders were selling off their shares, including the COO, I started looking for roles. And then that's when I started looking into becoming a contractor. And then, at the same time, I was noticing that I was training all these new staff, but I wasn't good enough to be promoted because it was a flat structure. So I'd already started conversations. So by the time it was announced that they were being bought by a private equity firm, I'd already had an offer for a job, and I was going straight into contracting. So can you see why future planning your career and having a vested interest in knowing what's happening with an organisation will serve you really, really well? I wasn't caught unawares when I was told, oh, everyone's going through a consultation and there are potential redundancies. I wasn't caught unawares because I already know that no one owes you shit. Least of all an organisation. You could be there for 10, 20 years, and I'm telling you, when they're ready to make someone redundant, you'll find your name on that list. And suddenly that HR manager that you've known for years, always smiling in the lift, will still smile in your face and still send you that redundancy letter. Anyone who is listening that is directly affected by the collapse of Credit Suisse, you have my support. I hope that you find the podcast useful. I hope that you find this episode useful. And I just also want to say, being a perm employee is not a bad thing, by the way. It's not. And there are pros and cons of being a perm and a contractor. And I've never shied away from that. I've never dressed it up in any type of way. But I just know that I got to the bag quicker when I was a contractor. I've climbed through the ranks in my career a lot quicker by being a contractor because I've been exposed to different organisations and different industries. But I also see with perm roles, the positive in perm roles as well. You know, you're getting a certain salary every month. You're not worrying about, oh, right, I'm coming to the end of my contract, I need to now find a new contract. You know, you're not. And also working in consultancy. So you could be a perm for a consultancy and then being placed on a particular project. I love all of that too. And I've worked for a consultancy before and I actually really enjoyed it. But I really enjoy the freedom of contracting, especially when you're trying to develop in white-dominated industries who don't, you know, necessarily promote you. Sometimes the promotion is what you give yourself. Me, I promote myself. So working for different organisations and being senior and having added responsibility are all the things that I got to quite quickly within 2 years of contracting that would have taken me 5-6 years as a perm. But then if I was to go back to perm, I'm going in quite senior now because I've done the legwork as a contractor. Understanding how to pivot your career is going to come from you investing the time and taking risks and investing money. If you're not willing to do that, then it's okay to be average. But then don't then accept average and then be angry when somebody then becomes a subject matter expert and is above average earning more than you. In order for you to be part of it, you have to have a leg in the game. And sometimes a career is just about understanding how to play the game. I hope that you found this episode really useful because I've really, really enjoyed doing the research on Credit Suisse. It's been so interesting for me and I love stuff like that anyway. If you've got any questions, then of course send me a DM on my social media or email hello@toytalks.com. If you have a work-related dilemma or a life dilemma that you want us to discuss on the podcast and you want my view, of course I will always respond to an email anonymously, which means that your identity will be protected, your anonymity will be protected. Email hello@toytalks.com. Be very clear, be straight to the point about what the issue is and what you hope to achieve. What is your goal in terms of the dilemma? What are you trying to get to? Because then it will help me advise you or help me look at options in the advice I'm giving you. If you want to follow me on social media, I've got my personal Instagram page, which is Toya_Washington. And I have the Toya Talks podcast Instagram page, which is Toya_Talks. I am also on TikTok and I share tips and tricks, work-related stuff and, mother-related stuff. I'm a new mom, so, that whole career and motherhood, I share stuff on TikTok. My handle is Toya Washington. I'm also on Snapchat, which is actually the original birthplace of Toya Talks. And it's Toya Washington on Snapchat. If you want to follow me on Twitter, sorry. If you want to follow me on Twitter, my handle is Toya_W. I'm not as present on Twitter, but hey ho, follow me if you're interested. And of course, we've got the website, www.toytalks.com. I have said this before I announced I was pregnant and delivered, and I am going to say it now. I'm not doing any public speaking events, and this year, 2023, I will consider opportunities in 2024. So if you have an inquiry about me doing public speaking, talk about work experiences, sharing some of my blueprints, working whilst black, all these type of things, any topics that you feel that maybe have been covered as themes in the podcast and want me to come to your organisation or your organisation's interested in me to do public speaking, I will be considering all public speaking engagements for 2024. And 2023 is out, it is closed. I want to thank each and every one of you for listening. I also want to thank all my new listeners. I see you, I hear you, and I see the download numbers, and I'm very, very proud of all the work that has been put into developing Toya Talks podcast and platform, and all the women and men too, because we have male listeners as well who have been really supported and helped in their career, maybe issues that you're dealing with at work. I'm so proud that the podcast has been a safe space for you to learn, grow, and be able to put things into practice so that you can benefit. I'm really proud of all of you for sharing the podcast as well. You all are just amazing. You know, I'm always getting added and tagged into like TikToks and stuff where people are really promoting the podcast, and I couldn't be even more proud if I tried at how, as a community, I feel very supported. So thank you so much. Make sure you share this episode. Make sure you re-listen to previous episodes, or just go in the show notes and listen to an episode and, you know, take some notes. Hopefully it helps you. The themes are relatable, and I'm really proud of the catalogue of episodes that we have published and gone live on so far. So I want to thank each and every one of you for listening to this episode. Thank you for all your support. Take care of yourself. Really think about your future planning when it comes to your career. Do not buckle under the pressure of the current cost of living crisis. Find your superpower within this period. Become a subject matter expert and command the terms and conditions and the salary you deserve. My name is Toya Washington, and you have been listening to the Toy Talks podcast.